mm-hmm, uh-huh, uh-huh, mm-hmm. I'm in love. I'm all shook up. Well, I am in love with Mississippi music, and it's all shook up, as you will see. The history of Mississippi music is of two traditions, black and white, coming along side by side and intermingling sounds and techniques. A new musical culture was created here. Mississippi music has had a tremendous impact on American popular music. Mississippians have blazed trails: Elvis Presley, B.B. King, Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, Jerry Lee Lewis, the Staple Singers, Jimmy Buffett, Charlie Pride, Tammy Wynette, and many others. In the beginning, there was the blues, born in the cotton fields of the Mississippi Delta. Around the 1890s, black musicians there began to develop a distinctive music based on even earlier forms. The field holler was a precursor of the blues and survives almost intact in many blues songs. Here are first Cornfield Holler, Thomas J. Marshall, and then Quittin' Time song by Samuel Brooks, both recorded in Edwards in 1939.
Kiss me here. Oh, 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 oh,
Dockery Plantation in Sunflower County is considered the cradle of the blues. It employed many farm laborers, musicians who gathered to play at Saturday night parties. It was near there where W.C. Handy, Memphis leader of a dance band, is credited with discovering the blues in 1903 in Tutwiler. Patterns, guitar riffs, and piano boogies invented in the Delta course through a broad spectrum of American popular music today, from country to hard rock to pop to jazz.
Charlie Patton was the first of the Mississippi bluesmen to emerge from the anonymous folk tradition and has inspired almost all the bluesmen who followed him. Here's part of High Water Everywhere. Tommy Johnson, born in Crystal Springs, played with Charlie Patton and others and recorded for Victor and Paramount. Here is some of Canned Heat, from which the 60s rock band took its name.
Crying can't heat mama, crying so low to learn me.
Robert Johnson is the most potent legend in all the blues and produced some of the richest music in the history of the blues. Here's some of his most famous blues, Crossroads.
I went to the crossroads, fell down on my knees.
The guitar was the instrument of choice for bluesmen because it was cheap, it was mobile, and it produced the desired sound, a heavy beat and blue notes. Harmonicas, also cheap, were popular. Younger blues singers learned from older ones in the juke joints where they played. They borrowed techniques here and a song there and created new styles. Juke joints became the showcases for traveling bluesmen.
Son House of Coahoma County is often regarded as a quintessential blues singer. This is called Jinx Blues.
Jinx around, round my bed. I say I got up this morning with the jinx all around my bed.
Skip James of Bentonia is considered by some to be the most lyrical of all the Mississippi bluesmen. Here's I'm So Glad.
In 1926, the pure country blues of black Mississippi musicians began to be recorded as record companies realized there was a market for the music. From the 1920s to the 40s, these records were a household item, available at general stores for 10 cents. And radio stations slowly began to offer blues programming.
Sonny Boy Williamson was one of the first bluesmen to perform live on radio on the King Biscuit Time broadcast of KFFA in Arkansas. Here's his famous blues, Eyesight to the Blind.
You were talking about your woman. I wish to God, man, that you could see mine. You're talking about your woman. I wish to God that you could see mine. Every time the little girl starts to loving, she bring eyesight to the blind.
Elmore James' Dust My Broom was first recorded in Jackson for Diamond Record Company. It has influenced countless other blues and rock musicians. Here's Booker White of Houston playing Aberdeen, Mississippi Blues.
I was moving Aberdeen on my way to Raleigh. I was over in Aberdeen on my way to New Raleigh. Well, them Aberdeen women told me they were.
Mississippi John Hurt and Avalon Blues.
Avalon, my hometown, always on my mind. But them Mars and Avalon want me there all the time.
Meanwhile, in the white world, other influences were shaping up. Church singing, white gospel, and some of the most important country singers of all time. First, let's hear the gospel music.
The Blackwood Brothers of Ackerman were the #1 white gospel group in the country and started their career in Jackson Broadcasting in 1937.
others show more of his fame.
Here's the Central Mississippi Quartet, an important early gospel group.
I'm only a pilgrim here below, a pilgrim below, while journeying through the desert sand. But after a while, oh yes, I know, I'll wear a white robe.
Elvis Presley sang gospel along with rock. Here's Elvis with Swing Low, Sweet Chariot.
Why don't you swing down, sweet chariot, stop and let me ride. Swing down, chariot, stop and let me ride. Rock me, Lord, come and easy will. I got home on the other side. So swing down, sweet chariot, stop and let me ride. Swing down, chariot, stop and let me ride. Rock me, Lord, come and easy will. I got home on the other side. Sweet, 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 sweet. Well, sweet, sweet, sweet. Well. Ezekiel went down in the middle of the field. He saw an angel working on a chariot wheel. Wasn't so particular about the chariot wheel.
White string bands made up of fiddle, banjo, and guitar developed from 19th century black string bands that played in tent shows, country dances, and house parties. They had developed partially from British country fiddling, but with blues characteristics. Gradually, the form shifted entirely back into the domain of white country musicians, but the white string bands of the 1920s owe at least as much to black traditions as to the British.
The Mississippi Sheiks, featuring the Chatton family, combined the blues into traditional string band. This is their biggest hit, Sitting on Top of the World.
Was all the summer and all the fall, just trying to find my little all in all. But now she's gone, I don't worry, I'm sitting on top of the world.
The Leake County Revelers was the most famous string band to come out of Mississippi in the 1920s and had a regular program Saturday nights on WJDX.
The human voice is the most important element in country music, but the fiddle, banjo, and guitar became the traditional country instruments. These instruments moved back and forth between the black and white traditions, with musicians exchanging riffs and other techniques until the rural string band began to be called country music, and Mississippians began to sing it.
Jimmy Rogers, born near Meridian, is the single most influential singer in country music history. Here's his famous Blue Yodel No. 4.
Holly, ole, ole. I'm going to California, where they sleep out every night. I'm going to California, where they sleep out every night. I'm leaving you, mama, 'cause you know you don't treat me right. Ole, ole.
Tammy Wynette of Itawamba County sings her Stand By Your Man.
Stand by your man. Give him 2 arms to cling to and something warm to come to when nights.
Bobby Gentry of Greenwood with Ode to Billy Joe.
June, another sleepy, dusty Delta day. I was out chopping cotton and my brother was baling hay. And at dinner time we stopped and walked.
Here's a country pop hit by Conway Twitty. It's Only Make Believe.
People see us everywhere. They think you really care. But myself I can't deceive. I know it's only make believe. My one and only prayer is that someday you care. My hopes and my dream come true. My one and only.
Here's Charlie Pride with Mississippi Cotton Pickin' Delta Town.
In a Mississippi cotton picking Delta town, one dusty street to walk up and down. Nothing much to see but a starving hound in a Mississippi cotton picking Delta town.
Here's Senatobia songwriter and performer O.B. McClinton.
I've been wearing them britches in Hollywood, too tight for me to walk. I've been twisting my mouth in funny ways, trying to talk a little Hollywood talk. But I passed out on my overalls yesterday, and God knows they felt so good. And I had me some grits this morning, friends, like any other human should. I'm the country boy. That's what I am.
Jimmy Buffett of Pascagoula hits country and pop charts. Here's Cheeseburger in Paradise.
Tried to amend my carnivorous habits, made it nearly 70 days, losing weight without speed, eating sunflower seeds, drinking lots of carrot juice and soaking over rays. But at night I'd have these wonderful dreams, some kind of sensuous treat, not zucchini, fettuccine, bulgur wheat, but a big warm bun and a huge hunk of meat.
Meanwhile, church music took another turn, this time in the black community. One music scholar said that the true roots of black gospel and spirituals can be traced to the extraordinary collision of cultures that took place in the beginning of the 18th century as African slave met English church hymn.
When spirituals were given a faster beat and instrumentation was added, gospel music was born. Here's Fannie Bell Chapman and the Chapman family of Centerville with He's My Rock, My Sword, My Shield.
Here's my rock, it's a wheel, godly leg. I say right up, makes no difference. Going down.
C.L. Franklin of Clarksdale, father of Aretha Franklin, exerted a broad influence on gospel music through his widely selling records of his sermons and music. Here's an excerpt from The Eagle Stirs Her Nest.
heaven. If thou wilt withdraw thyself from me,
The Five Blind Boys, formed at Pineywood School near Braxton, played to packed auditoriums all over the South. Here are the Five Blind Boys on Old Ship of Zion.
I would know in sin and sorrow, on an eye, Lord, in a light dark sea. Yes, when I saw a fall in the distance.
The gospel group most directly linked to the blues was the Staple Singers, led by Roebuck Staples of Winona. Here is some of Wheel and Side of Wheel.
How do you do? These different people, I'm gonna see you through. He's all right. He's up from the bottom to the top. Like the wheel. He's all right. By yourself.
The style of the modern quartet was established by the Soul Stirrers. Sam Cooke of Clarksdale is lead singer on this excerpt from Jesus Wash My Troubles Away.
Jesus wash away my troubles while I'm traveling here below. For I've got enemies, Lord, you know, and Jesus wash.
Early in the 20th century, Mississippi blacks began to migrate to northern cities where jobs and civil rights held promise of a better life. When country blues performers reached the city, they were exposed to other music traditions and to a new urban environment. By the end of the 30s, a blending of styles was emerging, the Chicago blues. As one scholar put it, the blues came out of Mississippi, sniffed around in Memphis, and settled in Chicago.
Big Bill Brunsey was one of the first Mississippians to take the blues to Chicago. He arrived in 1920 and by the late 30s was one of the most popular performers in the country.
Brunsey also took the blues to Europe in the early 1950s, and in 1961, Willie Dixon and Memphis Slim organized the first American Folk Blues Festival in Paris. Still today, Mississippi Delta bluesmen are revered and studied in Europe and Asia. An important development happened in Chicago. Blues went electric. To overcome the noise of Chicago's South Side blues clubs, musicians began to experiment with amplified instruments. Today, rock guitarists everywhere play with a metal or glass slider on their fingers, an homage to Delta bluesmen like Elmore James or Muddy Waters, who are also the first to explore uses of feedback and distortion with electric guitars.
Muddy Waters, born in Rolling Fork, became the king of the Chicago blues and set a new style for blues musicians. Here's Hoochie Coochie Man, which sold over 75,000 copies in 1954.
The gypsy woman told my mother before I was born, I got a boy child coming. He's gonna be a son of a gun. He's gonna make pretty women's jump and shout. Then the world wanna know what this all about. But you know I'm here. Everybody knows I'm here. Well, you know the hoochie coochie man.
West Point's Chester Burnett, better known as Howlin' Wolf, moved to Chicago in 1952, and his fierce, gravelly voice earned him his name. Two of his hits were Evil Going On and here, Spoonful. Willie Dixon of Vicksburg wrote over 200 hits for Chicago bluesmen, played bass in his own bands, and is considered the granddaddy of the Chicago blues.
I had a little red rooster, too lazy to crow for days. I had a little red rooster, to crow for days. He kept everything in the barnyard, either setting or ready to lay.
As the Chicago blues scene began to fade, B.B. King was creating his own brand of urban blues in Memphis, featuring his clean, biting, single-note guitar solos. Here's B.B.'s trademark song, The Thrill Is Gone.
That thrill will never be gone. Now let's talk about another form of music that was developed by black musicians, jazz.
Since the 18th century, there have been accounts of various combinations of fife, violin, banjo, and percussion instruments. These and brass bands were precursors of jug bands and ragtime. Here's Napoleon Strickland and his fife and drum band. The Mississippi Juke Band, with Gus Cannon and his jug stompers, are probably the earliest known direct ancestors of the jazz band.
Mississippi has produced influential jazzmen whose innovations changed the sound of jazz.
Lester Young, born in Woodville, was a star of Count Basie's band and is considered one of jazz's most innovative improvisers. Here's Blue Lester. Mill Tenton, the judge, born in Vicksburg, experimented with a free new style later called bebop and became the role model for a generation of musicians. Here's Milt on Makin' Whoopee with Branford Marsalis. Teddy Edwards of Jackson also favored improvisation over swing and was one of those responsible for developing bebop on the West Coast. Mose Allison of Tippo combined Mississippi blues with an urban tone to produce songs like Muddy Waters' classic Rollin' Stone.
Oh, well, my mother told my father just before I was born. She said, I got a boy child coming, he's gonna be a rolling stone. Gonna be a rolling stone.
Jazz singer Cassandra Wilson of Jackson has been called one of the most innovative jazz artists on the New York scene. Here's Blue Skies.
From now on,
Developing simultaneously with jazz was another music sparked by black Mississippians. Feeling good music, rhythm and blues, developed after World War II. Basically blues with a heavy backbeat and modern rhythms, R&B absorbed some elements directly from the church: emotion, tempo, and style.
John Lee Hooker of Clarksdale had hits in 1948 and 49 with Crawlin' King Snake and Boogie Chillin' before his more danceable Boom Boom of 1962. Here's a little of Boogie Chillin'.
One night I was laying down. I heard Mama and Papa talking. I heard Papa tell Mama, let that boy boogie woogie. It's in him, and it got to come out. And I felt so good. Went on boogie just the same.
Rufus Thomas of Casey made a splash with his Bearcat and answered to Big Mama Thornton's Hound Dog, later recorded by Elvis, and with his 70s Walkin' the Dog. Here's Bearcat.
You know what you said about me, don't you, woman? Well, you ain't nothing but a bearcat. Been scratching at my door. You ain't nothing but a bearcat. Been scratching at my door. You can
Sam Cooke of Clarksdale has been called the superstar of soul and the father of R&B. Here's his 57 hit for RCA Victor, You Send Me.
Darling, you send me. I know you send me. Darling, you send me. Honest you do, honest you do, honest you do.
Leland bluesman Jimmy Reed had a steady boogie beat that appealed to the dancing R&B fans. His biggest hits were Big Boss Man and Bright Lights, Big City. Here's Take Out Some Insurance.
If you leave me, baby, say you won't be back, that would be the end of me. 'Cause I'd have a heart attack. You better get some insurance on me, baby. Take out some insurance on me, baby.
Jerry Butler of Sunflower, a crooner in the Sam Cooke tradition, sings He Will Break Your Heart.
He don't love you like I love you. If he did, he wouldn't break your heart.
Showmanship was a big part of the R&B scene, with saxophone players swinging their instruments into the air and quartets working out dance routines to accompany the music. Rhythm and blues came from the marriage of urban blues and gospel music. The blues had a baby, and they called it rock and roll, and it appeared with a southern accent, created by musicians as comfortable with country music as with black music. The king of rock and roll, indisputably, was Elvis Presley of Tupelo. But before he embraced rock and roll, he sang a hybrid music known as rockabilly. Recorded and produced on Sun Records in Memphis, the two major rockabilly performers were Mississippians Elvis Presley and Jerry Lee Lewis.
Born in Faraday, Louisiana, across the Mississippi River from Natchez, Jerry Lee Lewis has performed or lived in Mississippi most of his life.
Come on over, baby, whole lot of shaking going on. Yes, I said, come on over, baby, baby, you can't go wrong. We ain't faking, whole lot of shaking going on. Well, I said, come on over, baby, we got chicken in the corner. Woo, huh? Come on over, baby, well, they got the bull by the horn. We ain't breaking, whole lot of shaking going on. Yeah, I said shake, baby, shake. I said shake.
The first rock and roll record was probably Rocket 88, the #1 hit in 1951, sung by Jackie Brentston of Clarksdale.
Women have heard of jalopies, you've heard the noise they make, but let me introduce my new Rocket 88. Yes, it's straight, just one way. Everybody likes my Rocket 88. Baby, we'll ride in style, moving all along.
Another early rock record was Rock Me by Lucky Joe Allman and his Hillbilly Rockers of Jackson on the Trumpet label.
Well, I'm a-going downtown to get a rocking chair. Letting my baby rock me away from here. She sure can rock me, Lord, rock. If you ever been rocked, you know just what I mean. Well, she rocked me up.
From North Mississippi, Warren Smith went to the Memphis Sun studios to record his rockabilly hit, Rock and Roll Ruby.
started watching all the rhythm in her feet. She's a rockin'.
In 1953, Johnny Vincent of Jackson recorded Junior Parker on his Ace label doing the seminal rock song Mystery Train.
Train I ride, 16 coaches long. Train I ride, 16 coaches long. Well, that long black train.
Bo Diddley of Macomb established the famous Bo Diddley beat.
Go listen to my baby diamond ring. If that diamond ring don't shine, he gonna take it to a private eye. If that private eye can't see.
Elvis Presley, born in Tupelo in 1935, is the most important figure in the history of rock and roll. Here are parts of 4 early hits: Mystery Train, That's All Right Mama, Don't Be Cruel, and Hound Dog.
Train I ride, 16 coaches long. Train I ride.
Well, that's all right, Mama. That's all right for you. That's all right, Mama. Just any way you do it, that's all right. That's all right. That's all right, Mama. You know I can be found sitting home all alone. If you can't come around, at least please telephone. Don't be cruel, too hard. You ain't nothing but a hound dog. You're crying all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog. Crying all the time. Well, you ain't another quarter rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine. Well, they said you was high class.
For over 35 years, from 1956 until his death in 1977, Elvis Presley's music has been the dominant influence in American popular music. He blended all of the sounds of Mississippi, country, blues, and gospel, and gave them to the world. It was the most influential music of our time. Listen. John Lennon. Nothing really affected me until I heard Elvis. If there hadn't been an Elvis, there wouldn't have been the Beatles. Rod Stewart. People like myself, Mick Jagger, and the others only really followed in his footsteps. Buddy Holly. Elvis Presley made it possible for all of us to follow. Little Richard. He was an integrator. They wouldn't let black music through. He opened the door for black music. Elvis was a blessing.